Looks like we're live. Welcome back to the live stream, y'all. I'm trying to find a cadence with this one, and so sorry if it's all over the clock and calendar and everything. I'm trying to figure out when it makes sense to do these live streams. And so on today's episode of the Long Boxing or Blurting While Dad live stream, um, I'm going to be talking about letting people enjoy things. And this is specifically in regards to Marvel Cinematic Universe, the DC Cinematic Universe, all the cinematic universes, but also just comics in general. Going to be giving some updates or my take on some interactions I've had online regarding the current Marvel books that are out there. And then I'm doing another hip hop stream. Didn't necessarily want to do it today, but there's a ton going on in the world of hip hop that's relevant to an old man like myself. So um, that's what I have on today's episode. I'll get to y'all after the intro. Peace. All right, welcome back to the Blurting While Dad live stream. So let's condense the nonsense. Let me jump right into this. So first things first. I've been in this long, weird dialogue. I'm in a lot of comic book groups online, and the topic du jour is the Marvels, and a lot of people have a lot of opinions about that movie, and one, a lot of them, including myself, have not seen it yet, and two, they are very strident in making sure that other people are not allowed to enjoy that damn movie. um, it's a weird, really weird dynamic that's going on in these comic book groups. And I know exactly where it comes from. I don't want to really go down the comics gate rabbit hole and talk about all the other stuff. But I will say this. Um, you are allowed to have opinions on things. We're all allowed to have opinions on things, and that's cool. It's dope to have opinions. I say that a lot. Instead of arguing with people, I just say opinions are dope. Opinions are cool. They're awesome. Here's what the problem is. People are allowed to enjoy things however they choose to enjoy them. They're allowed to enjoy things through their own lens. And so when I say that, I mean this. People are allowed to go out to the Marvels and have a good time with the movie. And the reason why I'm saying that and why I feel like that needs to be said is because it's the same shit that happened the last Captain Marvel movie that came out. Um, Brie Larson said something. I still haven't really quite figured out why people hate Brie Larson. I don't really get it. I know she mentioned stuff about more representation, and for some people that is like threatening language. I guess. Um, and they're mad at her. And so we are not allowed to like her in anything. It's a weird thing. People do the same thing with Amber Heard, and I know all the stuff regarding all that. Um, you're not allowed to like Brie Larson in movies because there's a segment of the nerd population that have basically made their identity hating Brie Larson. It is really weird. They're really loud and belligerent about it, and it's bizarre behavior in my opinion. But opinions are dope. Here's what I'm saying: people are allowed to like the Marvels. They're allowed to dislike the Marvels. But what we don't do and what we shouldn't do is scream at people who like them, who like the movie, uh, just because you don't. Just because you either like the movie for, just because you dislike the movie for story or direction or whatever. Chill on screaming at people who enjoyed the movie. I actually got into arguments with people about the fact that, yeah, me and my wife and kids went out to go see the first Captain Marvel movie, and we had a good time. And I had comic book nerds up and down, mad, like, like I was like I committed, blaspheme against what. They believed they were mad that we enjoyed the movie. It was the weirdest thing in the world, and people are doing it again online. Um, it's the odd behavior that happens in nerd groups. And so when I say nerds, and I got to clarify a couple of things. When I talk about nerd groups, um, there are different subgenres of nerd group that don't really get a lot of focus. There are gun nerds. Yes, there are gun nerds. You can be a nerd about guns. There are hip hop nerds. I am one of them. And so in nerd groups, there's this weird thing that nerds kind of do where um, we are only allowed to like the things that we like through our own, through a specific lens of experience. And so nerds that come from other backgrounds or whatnot, they're not able to enjoy things through their own lens of experience. And we there's this weird gatekeeping thing that nerds kind of do where they expel or push back against anybody that sees beloved franchises in a different manner. um, I ran into it with getting into it with Lord of the Rings nerds, where I'm like, them orcs look like black people, and they ain't any other black people in these movies, and so this is not the universe I want to really invest a lot of time in. And I had people writing paragraphs and paragraphs and paragraphs about how I was wrong and introducing race into it. And my contention was, well, I'm not necessarily introducing race into it because everybody in the movie is white. So somewhere along the line, there was a decision made to not cast any black people um, in these first set of Lord of the Rings movies. And so that's it feels like somebody else made it about race before I did. But they were really strident, and I mean, people were mad. Like, how dare you? How dare you not enjoy this movie where the only dark skinned people or melanated people are ogres and monsters in it? And you're supposed to understand all this other stuff, all this other subtext with the Tolkien universe and stuff like that. And I'm like, nah, just it's hard for me to connect with. That's fine. Um, People weren't accepting of the fact that I had a different lens on it. I see it in the Star Wars community. Star Wars community is really bad about it, but the MCU is getting bad about it. DCCU is bad about it. People are not allowed to kind of look at their own. They're not allowed to look at these franchises through their own lens of experience or whatnot. You know, and so it's just this weird gatekeeping thing. And here's what the problem is with that, because I'm gonna branch it over to hip hop too. And I've already had this conversation, but we gonna have it again. Um, there's this weird thing that old heads do where we force ourselves to be the center of the culture, and we never relinquish that. We don't allow other generations to come in and be the center of the culture. And we stridently pick fights with them. And it goes back into the Peter Pan syndrome I was talking about in hip hop, where we really absolutely refuse to allow these kids to have their own version, own um, way or means of expression in hip hop without us participating necessarily in their stuff and having our own lane of hip hop that we enjoy. We expect these 20-year-olds to make music that our 40-year-old selves can enjoy, and that is not a fair burden. But it also happens in comic books that we are not allowing new people to come into the nerdom, and what happens is, or the fandom, and what happens is we don't allow them to develop their own perspectives and develop their own passions for the thing, and we just bombard them with our own viewpoints on it. you know Case in point, like when I slander Batman, or the Batman slander hashtags that go around on uh Twitter. I'm calling it Twitter. Mama named it Twitter. I'm gonna call it Twitter. Where black folks are like, yeah, Batman seems like a cop, and he's problematic in this way and this way and this way. And you get white nerds who get all up in their feels about it, where you're like, yeah, Batman seems kind of like a fascist, bro. And he seems to be on some police brutality stuff too. well, there's times where he's taking out the corrupt police and blah blah blah. It's like, yeah, but there was a time where Batman was just running around, beating up low level criminals and mentally ill people and throwing, putting the lower level criminals into Blackgate, and then beating up mentally ill people and throwing them into Arkham Asylum. And that was kind of his thing. And so when you pointed out, they get really mad about it because it's a different filter, it's a different lens. We don't all have the same perspective on certain aspects of this society, and that's part of living in a society is people are going to develop different perspectives based on where they live, you know, and you know, depending on where you live or how you came up, um, interaction with law enforcement isn't always a positive thing, even if you're an innocent person. And there's a lot of black nerds who understand that side of things. And so when we tease people about Batman regarding that aspect of it, they really get pissed off about it. And it's not really embracing that piece of it. One of my favorite characters is Luke Cage, but Luke Cage is deeply problematic when you look at some of the stuff that they had him out here doing in his early days. Um, and you could tell that it was a white dude writing Luke Cage, and that was cool. That's fine, but he was problematic in a lot of in a lot of different ways, and I love the character despite him being written almost as this weird caricature when he first started out as a black person. Uh, 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 no, no. He started out as a weird caricature of a black person when he was first written. And it's only in recent times where they've kind of shaken that a little bit, and the comics have kind of rectified and said, "Oh, well, he's a great leader of people, and he is he is self-taught, and he's this street level genius, and now he's the mayor of New York." I don't know if he's still the mayor of New York right now in Marvel comic books, but you get what I'm saying, where they've tried to rehabilitate Luke Cage as a person because of the way it started out, where it's kind of weird. It's kind of also the same reason I think they could put Frank Castle kind of out to pasture for right now, um, because it's kind of a weird thing to be, um, people embracing, um, the weird fringe, right wing fringe identities, really embracing the symbol of the Punisher. Um, and that's even the creator of the Punisher wasn't on board with. And so they put him out to pasture because it's hard to explain his place in a Marvel universe right now. And that's cool. It's okay to share your fandom with other people who don't um, view it in the same lens. They find their own reasons to connect or disconnect with it. Um, I have a hard time, like I said, all the Cyclops slander that's abound from people who were introduced to the character of Cyclops from the X-Men cartoons and the movies. This is not the Cyclops that I know. The Cyclops I know is basically who we think Magneto and Wolverine are. And but people's entire perspective on character is really shaped by what you see in the movies and TV shows. And so that's the lens they're bringing to view the character through. And the best we can do is kind of say, okay, I get your perspective, but here's some reference points. Here's some comic books that might change your perspective a little bit. And if it doesn't, that's cool. That's fine. So, the jokes about what was it when Captain America went into the past at the end of uh Endgame, and people are like, so what was Captain America doing during segregation and stuff? What was he doing? Who was he fighting for? And those kind of questions. I mean, those are questions that need to be asked, and maybe there's that leads to potential future stories. But though a specific group of black folks was asking about that, and I was one of them. What was Captain America actually doing during segregation? If he went back and lived as an old man, where was he? um these are interesting questions. And how does it play into the black Captain Americas that were out there in red, white, and black? And the patriot, who's probably going to be the center of a Young Avengers show here sooner or later. Um, where did he fit in all this? And telling the story of what Captain America did in the interim while he's living with Peggy. Those are good stories that need to be told, but they also contain a certain perspective that may not go with what the mainstream of the Marvel universe is looking for. Here's the bottom line about this nerdum stuff. There's a lot of media out there that was never intended to reach a broad audience. The the writers and artists were really focusing on a narrow segment of people, and that segment of people didn't look like me. And you can tell it with some of the older 70s, 80s, even 90s era books. Hell, you could tell it with the Teen Titans and why Cyborg doesn't really sound like a black teenager, even though that's what they wrote him to be. Um, and so that's okay to address that and is being cognizant of the fact that even though they never include blurs in the fandom when they wrote this stuff, we were still there reading these comic books, and we have certain opinions about the comic books or these movie franchises and stuff, and that's dope. And you can allow people to enjoy things the way that they see it. That's what I'm saying. Same thing goes for hip hop. As much as it pains me to say, even though I may not listen to some of these new artists or I don't really connect with their music, I'm not supposed to. I'm not going to beat. I don't want to go back and relitigate this, but I do feel like it bears repeating. I am not the target audience for a lot of these TikTok rappers and um, MCs that are popping up and doing things nowadays. The younger cats, I am not the target audience for it, and I've accepted that. A lot of hip hop heads my age have not accepted that, and I'm sorry for y'all, but you ain't the target audience for that stuff, and that's fine. There's plenty of music that you are the target audience of, and you can go consume that. And there's plenty of newer MCs that, if you would just listen to them, they're kind of keeping the culture alive in their own way. But you have to invest in them too, instead of just writing off the whole culture as a loss because you're not centered in it anymore. That's a hard thing to let go of. So next things next. We talked about letting people enjoy things, and I got it off my chest about interacting in these groups. So we're going to talk a little bit about what's going on in the news. And like I said, I wanted to spend an entire live stream talking about allowing people to enjoy shit. I mean, that's what I came in here doing. Um, that's what I wanted to do. And right now, it's not exactly easy, um, because there is a lot of other stuff going on, that really, in the last 24 hours, the news cycle for hip hop has been wild, and so I feel like I have to offer some kind of commentary on it, in my own methodology and the way I've seen things. Anyway, um, first things first. Um, Andre 3000 dropped that flute album. And before that flute album even dropped, it was wild. I was seeing people clowning it and having their jokes or whatnot. And I understand that's just how this social media cycles. Um, and on one hand, I get it. We want Andre to go back in studio and give us rhymes. But when you read what he said, and he wrote it, he made it. I think it was an interview where he's talking about where he doesn't really feel like he has anything to rhyme about. He said, I got a colonoscopy the other day. What am I going to rhyme about that? Uh, he's like, I'm losing, my eyesight's going bad. Do I rhyme about that? I probably could find something clever to say, but I don't think people want to hear it. And it's kind of sad. And to me, it's kind of a commentary again on how we treat older black musicians, especially when it comes to hip hop, because hip hop is starting to age out. A lot of these MCs who were center to the culture in the 80s and 90s are 40s, 50s, and 60s right now. And they aren't the same people that they were when they were younger. And one of the challenges is, Andre had been in the game when he's like 18 when Outkast came out. Like he was a young cat. And so he doesn't feel like he has anything left relevant to say, which isn't true. And it's kind of heartbreaking. And it's the marginalization, specifically in hip hop, but I've seen it in other music genres, but specifically when it comes to hip hop, the marginalization of the older um rappers. It's tough. um, we've been kind of bullshitted into believing that hip hop is, just a younger man's sport. The culture is 50 years old, bro, depending on what source you want to, how you want to date it. It, at, being, at least 50 years old. Um, and we don't allow those older MCs, like there's a lot of ridicule that older MCs get for still trying to participate in the culture. It's this weird thing. And I know other genres do it. I know there's going to be somebody like, well, pop rock bands only do, but you got to understand pop music does that to people all the time. But I'm talking about specifically narrowly with hip hop, where hip hop fans are hostile, um, in a lot of sense to the older cast that are still trying to do it, where it's nothing but nasty jokes and meanness. And I can even extend it over to R&B. So all the nasty jokes about, look at Genuine, and he's old and he's still out here doing it, and har. He still wants to earn a living as a singer, and he has a right to do that. Um, People are being deliberately cruel when it comes to that kind of stuff. And I feel like it really speaks to this fear of aging and getting older. And it's a tough gig. Like I said, I'm watching Andre 3000 where he's like, yeah, I feel like I don't have anything left to say. And I'm an old man who wants to listen to that. And we're like, you still got plenty to say. But then on the other hand, he's like, I want to try something new. And I'm like, all right, cool, go try it. He's like, well, I've been doing this flute thing. I want to see what that sounds like. All right, cool. I listened to it this morning um, while I was editing videos and working on some pages on this novel I'm working on. And it was chill music. Like if you listen to lo-fi hip hop at night, to help you relax, it was a cool little thing. It's not something I'm driving around to all the time, but if I need to be in a place where I need something in the background, um, to kind of drown out the silence, I was fine with it. And I don't always need to, be that level of engaged, but it wasn't for a lot of people, and that's cool too. Um, I think my concern with is how people are, even the lead up to it. There was people that got jokes and want to shit on it instantly. And for me, I mentioned it yesterday where you end up getting trapped in the prison of your own accomplishments. And I think that what happened to Andre, where people weren't really ready to accept him doing something that was radically different from what he was doing before. And on one hand, we mock and ridicule these older rappers for still trying to do the same thing and rhyme about, still trying to be relevant and participate in the culture. But on the other hand, when they do say, well, I don't feel like I'm relevant, I want to go do something else, but I'm still artistic and I want to share my art with the world, people are mocking him in that regard. And so it's damned if you do, damned if you don't. And that's what I feel like. I feel like it's this level of expected cruelty that the internet is kind of normalized, where, it's cool, and it's not just the internet. I know that there's always been a part of that in pop culture, but there's real normalized cruelty when, they see somebody doing something different, or somebody they feel like is too old to be participating, and somebody's going to have some sideways stuff to say. Like I said last time, I was sitting there watching a video. Um, Cisco was doing thong song. This dude was singing. He was on key. He was in step with his dancers. He had a full dance routine going. Didn't miss a note. Didn't miss a word. And then in the middle of it, he did a full cartwheel with no hands and landed on his feet and hit the last note. And the crowd went nuts and clapping. And you go to the comments and people are clowning him. Talking about, oh yeah, he's washed and blah blah blah. That man is a year older than me. If I tried to do a cartwheel with no hands, they would have to send the ambulance to come get me off that stage. You know, there are young performers right now that can't do half of what he did. And people are calling him washed. And the only reason they're saying he's washed is because he's kind of an elder statesman and what people have determined as a young man's and young woman's game. But the problem is, it feels like the young artists are getting fed into a meat grinder because that shelf life is getting shorter and shorter and shorter. And so, it's about, you got about 6 months before before the industry has moved on from you. And we need to do something here because we're going to lose a lot of musicians, a lot of artists who never get a chance to develop because the industry puts this artificial shelf life on Black music, and it sucks. Artists aren't allowed to grow from where they are. They're not allowed to do other things. They're not allowed to stay. They're not allowed to come up with things that are completely different or radically different because the industry says, "Oh, well, you've had your minute in the spotlight. Now we're going to put the spotlight on the next big thing that we tell everybody's the big thing." You know, and so I'm looking at a lot of these young artists. They just keep popping up left and right, and that's the sad part about it. Um, the industry is really built as a meat grinder, to always constantly be churning out what's new, and what's new ends up becoming old hat in about 4 or 5 weeks. And then by the time 6 months have passed, you've already been on memes, and people put your song in all kinds of TikToks and everything, and now they're ready to put you on the shelf and relegate you to the rest of your life. And then they expect you to to stop being an artist. And I don't see that with some of these other genres. You're allowed to age gracefully. Trace Atkins been around for a long time. Garth Brooks is still out there selling out concerts. Hell, some of these old MCs are still selling out concerts. Their ticket sales are doing better than some of these young rappers because the people they're trying to sell to don't have the money to buy these inflated tickets. So that's what I'm saying. So it is, that all the Andre 3000 things relate. And that's why I wanted to talk about it. It does relate to the concept of getting older in music and how hip hop is still kind of seen as disposable music in a lot of different places, specifically in the industry that has made billions off of hip hop. And it's the same thing that happened to jazz. It's the same thing that happened to blues. It's the same thing that happened to disco. Specifically with disco was insidious because disco was this kind of uniquely Black art form, and then they started bringing in disco bands that were different, that were white and stuff, and that was cool, and they were able to do their thing. And then they decided that disco sucks, and there was this really strong backlash against disco. But then disco ended up becoming um the tenets of it, and the rhythms of it ended up populating a lot of popular music on top 40 stations, while they killed the genre and cut a lot of Black artists out of any kind of royalties for it. It's crazy, but that's what happened. So um it's a weird thing, but we got to support our older artists and then give the younger artists a chance to kind of make some noise and support them even after the internet tells you their shelf life is over. We don't always have to be chasing every single trend that pops up. That's all I got to say on that point. Um, Another thing that I saw on the internet, and it's going around, the entire Diddy has that lawsuit from Cassie, and it's they put a trigger warning on the lawsuit, man. I'm not going to go into the specifics of it because it's still a pending legal matter, and I don't want to get sued behind any of this. But I will offer an opinion on some stuff. Um, the comment I saw specifically, and it was on Twitter, and Twitter is the place where hyperbolic lives. Twitter does hyperbolic reactions like nobody else's business. And one of the crazy things I saw on Twitter was people were saying, "So is hip hop, what's hip hop going to do?" Or "I bet that they don't do anything against Diddy and blah, blah, blah." Basically, hip hop and saying the whole culture is toxic and they're not going to say anything about Diddy, and basically treating it like how cats was, how some weirdos were acting around R. Kelly. Here's the thing. And I know that I'm speaking on it because Twitter does this weird thing where they take a subsection of a reaction or a reaction from a narrow group of people and they apply it to every uh, aspect of hip hop culture. But what I will say is this, and I can speak for a lot of heads when I say this. There's a lot of hip hop heads. We was off Diddy in 1996. We were sick of this dude in 1996, bro. And so there are a lot of cats that as soon as those accusations came down on Diddy, is like, yep, all right, well, that book, that chapter is closing, and it's he's as bad as we what we thought he was, and they moved off of him. But they've been shading Diddy since 1996. There's a group of heads that have been, and that is fine. I'm one of those heads where I'm like, you see him in the video dancing and stuff, and you're like, here he go again, bro. I'm sick of this dude. Um, and so I felt like that comment wasn't necessarily fair. I don't think hip hop's gonna rally around Diddy like that, bro, because hip hop really never really like they mess with the bad boy catalog just because it's the bad boy catalog and even the Uptown catalog from Uptown days. But Diddy as a person, we've been shading Diddy since, like I said, since 1996, bro. It's been relentless on Diddy. He's been on Diddy's neck since forever. Um, and people have been on his neck for different reasons. Some people view him as the boogeyman. I saw him as irritating dude who just wouldn't go away, who ripped off a lot of his artists. Some people saw him as a super predator. I think other dudes had other heads had their own view of him. But I don't think Diddy was ever really necessarily a popular figure. Like when I'm saying popular, I'm not talking about whether he sold a lot of records. That's not what I'm saying at all. So don't misconstrue that. Yes, the man has sold all kinds of records. But heads have never really like embraced him and will fight you to the ground on Diddy the same way that heads will fight you to the ground on Biggie or Nas or in my case Black Thought or a lot of other people that are considered legends in the game. They will not fight you to the ground about Diddy. And I thought the comment was kind of unfair because um, you know, like I said, there was all even people who loved everything that Bad Boy is putting out really didn't mess with Diddy like that. And so when I watch this, I don't think hip hop's rallying around Diddy. Um, and I try to use the way that people treat Russell Simmons. And I'd say this as somebody who was a big Russell Simmons fan. Like I wanted to be Russell Simmons when I was a kid. Um, but then all the allegations dropped, and I'm like, I you can fire Russell Simmons into the sun as far as I'm care. Um, I feel the same way. I don't really think people rallied around are gonna rally around Diddy the way that some segments real weirdly rallied around Bill Cosby or even really weirdly rallied around R. Kelly. I don't see it like that. There's gonna be weirdos that are gonna ride for him just because they're contrarians, and that's what it is. And I don't know. I can't say I can't give any truth or say the allegations are true or false. I can only speak on what's been reported because I don't have any specific insights or histories or um, comments from any of his artists or any from Cassie. I don't have any insight into any of that. The only thing I can speak on is what people have been, what's been reported in that report, and that report is pretty damning. So we're going to see how it plays out, but I don't see hip hop heads making these overtures about, Diddy was going to buy BET, Diddy was going to buy ABC. I don't see anybody making those overtures. He's always been kind of the villain to a degree, depending on who you talk to in music. And like I said, some heads didn't like Diddy, just based, they were really getting him on the pace out of the paint because of all the other rumors that were going on with him being on the down low or whatever. And that's a different leg of hip hop. Cats that are super invested in that, they have all kind they hate all kinds of people in hip hop. But I had different reasons for not really riding with Diddy. And a lot of it came through the fact that I got sick of seeing him everywhere. And I thought he ripped off a lot of his artists, which it looks like he actually did to a degree based on how the artists phrase it. And so I don't think people are gonna rally around him, is what I'm saying. I think Diddy's downfall, if that's what this is, if that's what we're seeing here, um, he's not gonna find a ton of uh people like rallying around him and saying that it was a setup or anything. People are just like, yep, that sounds about right. And they're gonna sit back and watch everything go. I don't see hip hop rallying around because, like I said, hip hop heads, when Diddy was at his peak, hip hop heads really didn't mess with Diddy like that. They might have messed with his artist, but they did not really ride with him like that. And so that's how I see it. I could be wrong, but I don't see the rallying around Diddy like people rallied around R. Kelly. And to be honest with you, yeah, there's a good amount of hip hop folks that were wrapped up in the rallying around R. Kelly, but there was also a lot of R&B folks that rallied around R. Kelly too. And we can address that at another time. That's not my subgroup. I'm a hip hop head. So that's what I have to say about the Diddy thing. We're going to see what happens with these allegations as they break, and as this case develops. I'm imagining that there's probably going to be more stuff that comes out about this dude. So, um, but yeah, that's why I felt like I had to, kind of defend hip hop a little bit because we aren't riding for Diddy like that. All right, so the last thing I want to talk about. So this morning I'm scrolling through X, Twitter, whatever the stupid. Like I said, I'm calling it Twitter. Scrolling through Twitter, and I see Drake was trending for some diss. I haven't listened to it yet. I try not to I try to pretend Drake doesn't exist. I'm not a huge fan of Drake, and so that's what it is. But it's just something I noticed. It's something I noticed about it, and it's hilarious to me. And it may be hilarious to you depending on whether you a fan of Drizzy or not. Every time I see Drake trending on Twitter, regardless of whether it's related or not, I see Drake trending and I see Pusha T trending every single time on Twitter. If Drake is trending, Pusha T is trending somewhere on Twitter. And it's really kind of an interesting dynamic because speaking as the hip hop head and somebody who loves the beefs and loves diss tracks and stuff like that, it's really interesting to me how we perceive how that beef went over. Because if you ask hardline Drake fans, they will be like, "Oh, Drake destroyed Push and all this other stuff." But every time Drake trends on Twitter, so does Push. And he really put kind of an indelible scar on uh, Drake's career and this weird thing because you cannot speak about Drake trending without Push's name coming up somewhere along the lines. And I know the diss track had a couple of bars for Push in it, but um, he wasn't the one that got the lion's share of the work, got the lion's share of attention. But I'm interested to see how this develops. Um, you know, like I said, my thoughts on Push are on Drake is pretty well documented. All you got to do if you know me on social media, um, if you know me on social media, you know that I'm not a fan, and so I take whatever opportunity I can to laugh at Drizzy. I'm not a fan, and so it's just me making fun of it. I really don't have a ton of complicated feelings on Drake's existence, but it's just an interesting thing that I've noticed that when Drake trends, Pusha T's name trends somewhere along the lines. Um, and I mean, it was notable. It was one of the most notable beefs, one of the most notable diss tracks in recent years. And it will go down as a weird kind of saga. Um, and the fact that Drake wants to prolong it by invoking Pusha T's name, I don't understand it, but we're gonna see how it plays out. I'm interested to see what happens. So that's all I got for the live stream this week, y'all. Oh no, actually it's not. Um, Along the lines, there was one conversation I was involved in. So we're shifting topics again, back to comic books. There was one conversation where I was kind of involved in a dialogue going on where people were talking about how hard it was to get into Marvel and basically using the X-Men books as a reference and saying the X-Men books are all over the place. And I guess I don't necessarily see it like that. I think the X-Men books are better than they've been in a long time because there's a lot of them out there, yes, granted, but you can really kind of pick and choose your own adventures with the X-Men books that are available out there, and kind of get on board wherever you want to be. And you get a chance to see characters that really don't get a lot of spotlight getting their own spotlight. Like the Iceman book has been really good. Um, the Nightcrawler book where he's basically wearing the Spider-Man costume and basically sharing the patrolling duties with Spider-Man. That's a pretty dope book. It's really interesting. It tells some interesting um, takes on what happened with this last recent arc of the X-Men saga, where at the Hellfire Gala, basically they had another mutant massacre, and so this is him kind of adjusting to the world after that and figuring out what he's going to do while staying, on the run. Was really kind of interesting. The Jean Grey, um, where she's out and, I'm trying not to spoil too much, so I'm trying not to say too much. But the Jean Grey book where she's going through her past lives or her history and figuring out where she went wrong. Uh, and wondering if she could have prevented the Hellfire Gala and the massacre that happened is really interesting. Um, and it's respinning some classic stories involving G. Gray. The stuff with Storm is amazing. It's really fleshing her out as a character, um, and tying in some things that have been mentioned throughout the years with her in the magical side of the Marvel universe. And so these books are all really good. The Cable and Bishop, and sorry I don't have the names specifically of the titles, but the Cable and Bishop story has been amazing, where it shows how badass Cable and Bishop can be when they work together. And really establishes Bishop as a character that we can actually invest in, which I am guilty of kind of dismissing Bishop because I thought the way that they've handled him up until this point has been kind of a throwaway character, and they made him into something that I want to see. And so the X-Men books are really in a good place right now. And if you want to get on board, there's enough of a distance between I would say you probably want to start with the Hellfire Gala, this year's Hellfire Gala, and start there with the current Mutant Massacre and kind of work your way through it. What else is there? The Dark X-Men with Madeline Pryor and Havoc and Archangel is really good. These are great starting points. And so, like I said, go back to the Hellfire Gala and, so probably, this summer ish and start reading there. And that's a good point to jump on the X-Men series because they're really doing some interesting things with the X-Men books and really fleshing out characters that don't get a ton of spotlight. And they're setting the stage for what's going to come up in the Marvel universe. I really do hope they stick with it. I was 100% on board with the Krakoa era and the Ten of Swords and all that other stuff. That stuff was really interesting, but I can understand how it was kind of baffling to get on. But the current X-Men books, X-Force is really good. And they kind of did a soft reset with the Hellfire Gala. Um, you know, and if you don't know, I don't want to get into too many spoilers here, but I'm interested to see how some of this stuff pays off because essentially as it stands right now, and spoilers, if you don't want to be spoiled for specific details of it, go ahead and click off. And give you a little bit of time to bounce. But from a spoiler standpoint, um, X-Men are essentially fighting uh, AIM and Hydra, kind of Hydra AIM mixed with the anti-mutant forces in the Marvel universe, and there's a group called Orcus. And so it's really interesting to watch what's going to be the comeuppance of Orcus because they got a lot of X-Men gunning for them. Um, Kitty Pride is back to being Shadowcat, and she is killing people left and right. Colossus done caught a body out here. And so Beast has gone into his full-blown villain arc where he's actually a worse person than Dark Beast. And I want to see where that goes because I think he's, the way that they've kind of put Beast out here, Hank McCoy is absolutely terrifying. And so, and his vengeance is going to be awful on Orcus. And so, of course, Wolverine's going to be out here ready to just, all the Wolverines, Laura Kinney and OG Wolverine, they ready to kill something. Apocalypse is on board and ready to get his hands dirty. And so all these other uh X-Men components are coming together, and it's gonna be one hell of a finish for this Krakoa arc when it closes out. So if you want to get on board, or if you've been interested in getting into the X-Men books, I'd recommend starting with the Hellfire Gala as your jumping on point, and then just catching up to the books from there, because it was kind of a soft reset um, to the X-Men mythos in Marvel. And so I think if that's something you're interested in, go for it and jump on now, because I think to be honest with you, um I don't think the X-Men are going to get this kind of attention for a while again. So um like I said, it's up to y'all. You choose your own adventure with it. Like I said, I've enjoyed the X-Men books. um I've had a harder time I've had a harder time following what's going on in DC, and some people say DC is actually easier to follow than um, what's happening in Marvel, and I'm not necessarily seeing that, because I've been following DC for a couple years, and the Batman franchise seems to be a mess. It seems like they're just kind of starting arcs and jumping around and a couple of other things. So I'm not necessarily super thrilled with where DC is right now. I get it, but and I understand how some people think that it's in a better spot. For me, it's not necessarily in a better place, but it is what it is. Um, I think that DC uh, is more of a narrative mess right now. Um, and I'm not saying that in a bad way. I think they're kind of shaking out what direction they're going to head next. Um, but like the Dark Crisis was just like this big, huge, multi it was a big, huge event that was a complete and utter waste of time. I feel like Planet Lazarus didn't really get enough attention, and the villain on Planet Lazarus was kind of this newbie villain that was kind of confusing. The Night Terrors event was super interesting, but also didn't change a heck of a whole lot in the DC landscape. They ended like three major crossover arcs, and none of them really had much impact. The only thing that the Dark Crisis really did was just take the Justice League off the board and make the Titans the Justice League, more or less. Um, the Flash has been interesting, but they can't figure out what the hell they want to do with Wally West. Still, Wally West, nobody knows what they're going to do with him. I'm not feeling it because Wally West is my Flash, and they don't know what the hell to do with him. They just don't. And I know the Titan now. Somebody pointed out to me the Titans book is set before the Flash book. In one book they're killing Wally West, in the other book they're giving him new powers, and both of them are hard to follow. Superman's been really good. Now Superman's been easy to follow, and Superman's been really good. I got to give props to making Superman interesting and re-envisioning his rogues gallery, because the new rogues on Superman is really dope. So that's what I have. So I appreciate y'all tuning in. Appreciate y'all listening to me rant about hip hop and comic books. I'm gonna try to be on here a little bit more. Like I said, I'm trying to figure out the cadence. So that's all I got. Um, my socials. You know how to reach me. I'm gonna be chopping this up and posting these little tidbits on social media so you can see shorter form versions of it. And I'm gonna be working this into a podcast. I got to figure out what the Blurting While Dad podcast actually is going to sound like. So you'll be seeing that coming out here pretty soon. So that's all I got. I'll talk to y'all later. Thanks for tuning in. Peace.